Conventional Islamic Sciences, the curriculum. And he studied abroad, studied locally, studied in Canada as well. Alhamdulillah, at a young age, he accepted Islam at the age of 17. And mashallah, since then he has been dedicated to learning and studying. And mashallah, he lives with his family and his 4 children here in Lombard area. And we are blessed that he is giving us time in this very busy month of Ramadan for us and our mu'takifeen to benefit from his knowledge. And so he's chosen the Imam Ghazali's book, inshallah, where he will be discussing various diseases of the heart, maladies of the heart, as well as their treatment, inshallah. So this is one of the main concepts or the main aspects of the i'tikaf, is to purify ourselves. So we should all sit with talab, with desire to change, with desire to implement whatever we are hearing, inshallah ta'ala, into our lives. And if you would like to take notes or something like that, this is a good time as well. I would request again that we take notes on a notebook instead of using a cell phone, which may end up leading us in another direction. As much as time as we can stay away from that would be the best, inshallah. Any of the brothers in the hallways and other areas, I request you also to make your way up here. Jazakumullah khair. Then there will be a 10-minute break, and after that then we'll have Mufti Hisham Dawood, who will be inshallah heading the Tajweed Halaqa for an hour after that.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفاه. أما بعد, alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of His blessings that He bestows upon us inwardly and outwardly, blessings which we could never truly appreciate nor even recognize. وَإِن تُعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to try and sit and encompass all and any blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather any blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you would try to encompass any blessing of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, indeed the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be enumerated. So we say alhamdulillah. This is another discussion in itself and of itself, that what are the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how the first stage of tawheed in reality is called shukrul mun'im. It is to give gratitude and show your appreciation to your true benefactor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From that, one understands the concept of rububiyyah and every other aspect of tawheed. And so you don't know where your blessings are coming from, you will not acknowledge the one who's giving it to you. If you cannot acknowledge the blessing, you cannot acknowledge the one who's giving it to you. Is that true or not? It's a very simple concept, right? But that's the bottom line. If you can't acknowledge what you've been given, you won't acknowledge the one who gives it to you. And that's the very beginning. And this is the beginning of iman, of tawheed and everything. So we say, and we start our kalam with what? Alhamdulillah. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That every quality of perfection, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. True qualities of perfection, of absolute independence, of complete and absolute knowledge, and so forth and so on, all of that belongs to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala alone. This is also part of the meaning of alhamdulillah. That Allah alone is that being which is perfect. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His perfect knowledge, has created imperfect beings, which would be us. And He has required us to find a way to not even, I would say balance our lives, but to create equilibrium within ourselves in order to become that soul that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is pleased with. Ya ayyatahan nafs al-mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. This is the goal. This is actually what Islam is all about. The fruit of Islam, no pun on words if anyone knows what that is. The fruit of Islam is not just becoming, right, a quote-unquote good person. The reason why I'm saying that is because that is a term people love to throw around nowadays, right? I'm a good person. Let's face it, you live in America, right? I believe we're in America. Are we in America? We're in America, right? America. So people here, they'll say, you know, I don't have a religion, but I'm a good person. Right? Is that true? I don't have any particular religion, but I'm a good person. And I don't really care what religion you are either, but as long as you're a good person. It's a very popular term. So what exactly does that mean? Even for Muslims, the unfortunate thing, and I have to be, you know, very, 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 very frank with all of you. In the 20th century, the Muslims have seen such days which the Ummah before you would never even imagine. And many of us, including some of the elders in this room, have been brought up on versions of Islam that are so far away from Islam, you wouldn't have any idea. Knowledge, yuqbadul ilm, is the first thing in the signs of the last days. Knowledge is lifted from the people. So if I can speak frankly to you, what we have now in the 20th century is a very politicized Islam. That is a reaction to what the Ummah experienced between the 19th and 20th century, meaning colonialism and post-colonialism. Let's just be frank. And it's so far away from what Islam really is, it's not even funny, and now we see the mess that we see in the Muslim world. The true teachings of Islam people don't want to hear, because it's the teachings that we see here, the teachings of sabr, of patience, of forgiving, right? Of afu, forgiving people and not being vengeful, of being content with the qada, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He decides to do in His kawn. It is His world, it is His universe. Whether it is for or against you, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. These are the days which we exchange between the people. In other words, sometimes the Muslims have power and izzah, sometimes they don't. Because this ayah was revealed to the Sahaba directly in context with the battle of what? The battle of Uhud. So sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. That's not the purpose of your Islam. If you think that's the purpose of your Islam, to conquer and to have everything you want in this world, and to be any people of izzah and so forth and so on, then you're a victim of the 20th and 21st century Islam, not real Islam. Okay? The real purpose of Islam is something much different. It is this. It is that thing that nobody wanted to hear when Rasulullah gave da'wah. In fact, all the Anbiya gave da'wah to this and nobody wanted to hear it, which is what? وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. That the life hereafter is better and everlasting. And that if you want to make effort for something, if you want to be concerned about something, you should be concerned about that life. That was probably, out of all the aspects of Tawheed and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is three things that the prophets, every prophet came with. Sharia changed, and Sharia also would differ from prophet to prophet, from the Rasul, the prophets and the messengers. But one thing that never changed was their message. And what was that aspect of their message which never changed? One is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. One is Risala, that I am a messenger of Allah and you must follow me. And the third is the Akhirah. If you really look in the Quran and think about this, when you're reading in i'tikaf and you're listening in Taraweeh, what is the thing that you will find them the most repugnant subject of all of this, that the kuffar, right, when they heard these things, the thing that was the most difficult and most bitter pill to swallow out of all of it? Tawheed is very easily understood because it's in the fitrah of man to be able to understand it. I'm not saying the fitrah is Islam, that's a whole other different subject, that's not true. But the fitrah of man is to be able to understand and accept Tawheed. It's a very easy thing to understand. Risala even, all it takes is a little bit of humility to acknowledge that the Prophet ﷺ is better than you and you need to follow him. But the most difficult thing, even sometimes for believers, is the third part, to accept the Akhirah. Not just to accept it, but to understand the Akhirah is more important than what you have in front of you. It's more important. If you are to prioritize things, then your life coming up is much more important than what you're dealing with right now. That is the bitterest pill to swallow, not just for non-Muslims, even for quote-unquote Muslims. We'll all say we believe in it, because if you don't believe in it, you're a kafir, right? And tu'minu billah wa malaikatihi wa rasulihi wa kutubihi wa yawm al-akhir, right? You have to believe in this as an essential part of your Islam. So you're not going to tell, no one's going to say, right, outwardly that, oh, I don't really believe that. But again, the question is not whether you accept it or not, whether you do tasdeeq, whether you accept it or not, that the akhirah is real. The question is whether you accept the fact that what the Prophet is telling you is the akhirah is more important for you than this life. Not that you can't have things in this world. And you'll see, I'll balance this out, don't worry. Later on I'll talk, I might surprise you when I tell you about how we deal with certain things in this country especially. I'm not saying you can't have the world or you shouldn't achieve things in this world. But in the heart and mind, one should understand very clearly that the goal of your Islam in the end of the day is najah. It is salvation in the akhirah. That's the goal. You may not be a quote-unquote even good person. Let me reiterate that point. You may not be a quote-unquote good person. As long as you don't have to go to hell, man zuhziha 'anil nar, right? As long as you are saved from hell, you won't care whether you're a good person or not in the akhirah. You understand? All you will care about is that, alhamdulillah, I don't have to go to Jahannam, right? This is the man zuhziha 'anil nar faqad faz. That's all you'll care about. You understand my point? So being a good person is such a weird, like here, a lot of times what we do, we mention things, when you want to like remove Allah from the equation and deen and religion from the equation, right? Then people come up with batil. Batil has no dalil. You understand? Falsehood really has no proof. There's nothing you can use to prove, no dalil you can use to prove batil. For instance, if you remove Allah out of the equation and people say this is Mother Nature, right? It's Mother Nature. So if you were to ask somebody, what exactly is Mother Nature? You know, they couldn't answer you. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? There's no definition for Mother Nature. There's no such thing. That's why you can't define it. If it exists and it's real, I should be able to define it, right? What's Mother Nature? The answer is there's no such thing. That's why you just say things that have no meaning. What's a good person? You understand? What's a good person? Can you define that for me? And someone will say, oh, someone who, you know, and that's very, and it depends who you ask. Someone who smiles. So I can smile, and in the meantime, I want to stab you in the back. Does that make me a good person? You understand? I smile at you, I'm very nice, so I'm a good person. Someone who accepts everyone. So accepting everyone becomes what? A good person. It's so vague. It has no meaning. Right? It has no meaning whatsoever. But in Islam, alhamdulillah, we don't have goofy ideas like good person. We have what's called al-insan al-kamil, a perfect human being. And that perfect human being is none other than what? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Innaka la'ala khuluqin azim. This is the standard. In other words, when we want to know not who's a good person, but when we want to know a human being in its perfection, or in their perfection, I should say, not it. We're not objects, obviously, right? We're dhu'ul uqul, hopefully, right? We have intellect, hopefully, right? So we're not objects. But it is when we want to know who is or what are perfect human beings, we use one standard only, and that is Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And part of the teachings, as I said, if the goal is najah, and to leave this world radiyatan mardiyah, in a state that Allah is pleased with us, so then a person has to ask the question, then how will I become pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Is it just a matter of making salah? Because salah is an outward action. But then even our outward actions, what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. All of our actions are judged according to what? Intentions. So therefore, what becomes more important at this point in time? The outward or the inward? Inward. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا أَجْسَامِكُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ. Because then the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, Allah is not looking at your outward actions, your outward forms, your outward forms or your outward shapes, but what Allah is looking at is in your heart. You understand? He's looking into the nature of your intentions and what you do. So then we understand why then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala is reported to divide fiqh. What we usually, when you say the word fiqh, you think of jurisprudence, right? Halal and haram. But when Imam Abu Hanifa defined it, because actually fiqh means fahm, is to understand things, to have a deep understanding of things as they are. This is fiqh and faqaha. So he defined it as what? That there's three categories: al-fiqh al-akbar, al-fiqh al-awsat, wal-fiqh al-asghar. That there is a top peer, which is called al-fiqh al-akbar. The greatest and the most important knowledge in our deen is actually the knowledge of i'tiqad, what you call theology, what we believe in. Because this is the pinnacle upon which the rest of the deen lies. If you don't have iman, nothing else matters, right or wrong? So the greatest thing for a Muslim to understand is their i'tiqad, is what exactly do you believe. After that, he said, al-fiqh al-awsat is akhlaq, meaning your manners, your morality, the way you behave as a human being. And this is the subject matter which we will be discussing in this session, right? That when you want to talk about being a person or a soul, a nafs, that's returning to Allah in a state that is pleasing to Allah, you have to talk about tazkiyat an-nafs, which is what? I said equilibrium. There's a reason why I mentioned that, because zakah literally means to take out the excess. It's to take out the excess, right? If you have a lot of money and wealth which you're not using, then a person must pay what? Zakah. Because this is taking out the excess. It's purifying your wealth. Without this zakah, that excess money that you are not using becomes a burden on you. It's sinful. You understand? So you must get rid of the excess. So in the same way, every human soul, there's certain qualities and traits which are excessive. You understand? Excessive behavior. They call it excessive compulsive behavior and this. And I have these terms for these things, right? And you have to, so to speak, trim off a little bit of that fat in order to be healthy again. You understand? You have to be healthy. This is what Allah wants from us. Now, healthy does not mean perfection. That's part of the thing we must understand from the very beginning as well. Rasulullah ﷺ was al-insan al-kamil. He was the perfect human being, no doubt. But the fact of the matter is, you and I, no one in this room is ever going to become Rasulullah ﷺ. See, today, people have a lot of, again, weird ideas because we don't know what Islam is. So we use words like following the sunnah. So we see certain people in the communities that have like very serious problems, psychological problems, problems of character, problems, all the way around. The way they treat their wives, the way they treat their children, the way they treat each other, lying, stealing, cheating, arrogance, all of these problems. These are all spiritual diseases. And we give simple solutions like following the sunnah, which is wonderful. Sounds great. But first of all, again, we shouldn't be like these other people who say things that have no meaning, like good person and Mother Nature. So when you say sunnah, what do you mean? Even amongst the ulama, the word sunnah will have a different meaning according to who you talk to. So if you talk to the muhaddithun and you ask them to define sunnah, they'll give you the definition of a hadith. Whatever Rasulullah ﷺ said or did or approved of. And also all of his states, sleeping and awake, so forth and so on. Everything that the Prophet did, in other words, the whole very being of the Prophet ﷺ becomes their subject matter, what they study. Why? Because they're just trying to gather all the information pertaining to the Prophet. You understand? They're trying to gather as much information as they can about and concerning the Prophet ﷺ, even if it's about the pillow that he slept on, as you see Imam at-Tirmidhi gathered hadith like that, right? Because that's what they're focusing on, just the Prophet, not necessarily making a ruling. So if you ask a faqih what is a sunnah, right? If you ask a faqih what the sunnah is, what would they tell you? It is a practice in Islam that you must do and you cannot leave without an excuse. And that if you leave it without an excuse continuously, it becomes sinful, right? So that's different. So according to him, the sunnah is not a matter of just it's a hukum, meaning what is its ruling in Islam? What does the sunnah mean in Islam when you have to, as a person, do an action? What is the sunnah? It is a category underneath fard, which is emphasized that you should do and must do, and you can only leave with an excuse. You probably heard that before, right? If you ask an usuli, a person who gets these ahkam and makes these rulings, they'll say the sunnah is ma wadaba alayhi an-nabiyyu wa ashabu. Whatever the Prophet and the companions together can continuously practice, this becomes the sunnah, meaning it becomes Islamic law. Now, if you mean the sunnah by its very linguistic meaning, which is what the Prophet did, then there are two types. There is the sunan al-zawaid and sunan al-huda. There are certain things that the Prophet ﷺ did that are not part of Islamic law, like eating honey. Newsflash. Eating honey, right? You're not going to get rewarded for it. No offense to anyone. You're not going to, and I mean, maybe at the most, understand this point very clearly, you may be rewarded for eating honey because of your love, if you have this intention, that I love the Prophet ﷺ so much, that eating honey, I want to do it just because I love him that much. You will get rewarded for the love, not necessarily the action. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's the love that you have that you may be rewarded for, not necessarily the action. Because sometimes, let's say someone, they have a health problem, they can't eat honey. Will you force them to eat honey simply because the Prophet ﷺ did it? Even Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, La, no, read it with Tib al-Nabawi. That's not the case. Dates are not good for everyone. We always use dates for iftar, and I love dates. I use them for iftar too, but actually dates, according to Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah in his book Tib al-Nabawi, are not good for people in cold climates. This is what he said. You think he doesn't know the sunnah? You think he doesn't know the hadith? You think he doesn't know what the Prophet did? So I said dates are not good for people in cold climates. This is a matter of medical practice. It's not a matter of what? The Prophet did it. Because not everything the Prophet did forms what? Forms sharia. You understand? Then you have those things which are called sunan al-huda, which means these are the practices that the Prophet did that become part of sharia. Now why am I saying all that? Because the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when dealing with people, he did not give them a very blanket statement and answer. People would ask him, Ayyu amali afdal? Which action is the best action? So the Prophet would respond to some people, for you it's jihad. For you it's staying home and taking care of your parents. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? If there's one answer for everybody, why did he give people different answers? Because people are different. We should be able to understand that, right? Because what? People are different. Right or wrong? Human beings are different. Your problems are not mine and my problems are not yours. And you should say alhamdulillah for that. Because everybody gets what right, they are capable of handling. لا يكلف نفسا إلا وسعها. If you had my problems or I had your problems, we wouldn't be able to deal with those things. You understand? If you were to put yourself in my shoes, you'd go crazy. And if I put myself in your shoes too, I'd go crazy. So I can't do this. Right? So every human being gets a test accordingly what they are and how they are. So the Prophet also used to deal with people accordingly, meaning who they are, what they are, and their condition. And he would say, you do this, you don't do that. Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu was allowed to give all of his wealth in the path of Allah. Many of the Sahaba tried to do the same thing and he prevented them. He said, no. Why? Because you can't do what Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu does. And so that is not the hukam for you. That is not what you're supposed to do. You get my point, right? So when you understand this science, this is why, we read books about it, but I must tell you, whatever you read in a book and whatever you hear in a speech, you should not and try and apply these things without some kind of supervision. Again, because of the way we understand Islam today, that's a very unpopular thing to say, oh, you need a sheikh. I said, oh, akhi, what are you trying to talk about? It's some kind of cult or something. I don't trust anybody. We're not telling you that you should become the abd of a sheikh. We're telling you that just like in medicine, you cannot diagnose yourself. I say, you know what, I had chest pains. So the other day I went to the doctor because I said, I must have a heart problem. Open me up and perform surgery. And what if it just turns out to be indigestion? Do you understand? So actually, all you had was indigestion. You need to cut back a little bit on the curries, right? That's all it was. And for your heart too, by the way, you should do the same. But anyhow, right? But you said, I need heart surgery. Why? Because I have heart pains. Do you do that? Only a fool does that. It's the same thing in this respect. You can hear these things. These are just going to be general. We're going to create a general awareness within ourselves of how the human soul works and how the human soul needs to be rectified in order to be pleasing to Allah. But before you try to do this, the main message here is don't do this at home. You understand? Don't go back and diagnose yourself and think that, oh, this is the way I'm going to deal with my problems. I'm just going to follow the sunnah. Because again, even in the sunnah, you have varying answers for varying people. And you're not a faqih, you won't be able to figure even that much out, no matter how many hadith you read. That which one of these hadith apply to me and which one doesn't. Because we will come across hadith. Like the first subject, I'm using actually the book Al-Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din, which is a book written by Imam Ghazali. If I have to talk about Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala in front of you, then you should be ashamed of yourself. You should learn about him. If you want to ask about him, ask me another time. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala. But if you don't know who he is already by this point in time, then you should actually be ashamed. I need to learn about our ulama and our history. Needless to say that he was such a personality in the history of Islam that his writings and works did not just affect the ummah, but even outside of the ummah, the non-Muslims today and all of our Ivy League colleges and everything still marvel at the intellectual accomplishments of Imam Ghazali. Right? So mashallah, his works affected not just the Muslim world, they affected the whole world, and that's a reality. So to show you what kind of an intellectual giant he was. The interesting thing is though, despite the fact that intellectually, the aqliyat, all of these rational sciences he had mastered, and as well as the Islamic sciences, he wrote himself that he came to a point where he felt that he was literally, in his own words, we won't say that, but in his own words, he felt that I was not a real believer, I was zindiq. All this was just show. And so he took a 15-year sabbatical, finding himself. With great mujahada and effort, then he came back and he wrote books like Ihya Ulumuddin. And basically he said that of all the paths and ways to know Allah, the greatest path and way to know Allah, and I'm going to throw a real controversial word out there again because of our context in Islam in the 20th century, nobody knows what this word means. He said the greatest and the most pure paths to find Allah is the path of the Sufi. Controversy, right? Oh boy, what is he talking about now? Whirling dervishes and the like, right? No. If you have questions about that, again, this is not the time for it. You can ask me later. Or you can ask any one of the ulama later. What does this mean, Sufi? Aren't these those crazy people, like I said, the whirling dervishes and all that? What he means is the only path to true realization of yourself and of Allah is mujahada. It is struggling against the soul. It is struggling against oneself. It is going through these hardships, trying to basically create this equilibrium, this tazkiyat an-nafs within the soul. Only when a person is willing to struggle against themselves will they truly find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if rationally you know and you understand Allah exists and you have no doubt about it. Even if you say, I am a mu'min, I have complete tasdeeq that everything the Prophet ﷺ brought is true. There comes a time when you are not true to yourself and your Rabb until you actually learn how to do what? وَالَّذِينَ جَهْدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. That those people will strive in our way, the mujahada of reforming yourself and making yourself a better person in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give a person hidayah, will guide a person. Okay, and that guidance, subulana, it's a jama', it's in such a general way, subhanallah. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala will now give you the tawfiq, right, to see things as they are and put them into practice. And part of this knowledge, as we mentioned, is the knowledge of the soul, of the self. What are its characteristics, what are its qualities, and which one of those characteristics and qualities are pleasing to Allah, and which of those characteristics and qualities are displeasing to Allah. And that is the whole subject matter in essence. So you have to know two things. First of all, you have to know yourself, right? That's why it's very important that you can't just read a book and do this at home, because every human being is different. If you don't know who you are, and you have to be honest about who you are too. You cannot say, I'm a good person, or even you can't say, I'm a good person according to my parents, or my neighbors, or my society, or whoever. That doesn't work either. That doesn't work either, because what makes them happy doesn't necessarily make Allah happy. Is that true? Even if they're Muslim, what makes them happy does not necessarily what makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy. Not in every case and every time, especially nowadays. Especially nowadays. Right? So when you ask this question, you can't put yourself up to this standard, right? What people think of me. What standard are you putting up against? What did I say before? Who is Insan al-Kamil? The Prophet ﷺ. But at the same time, we know we can't do many of the things, as I mentioned, the Prophet did. So then what do? This is when you have to differentiate between the advices that the Prophet ﷺ gave that are general, right? That apply to everyone, and that is the job of the ulama, and which are not. And then you take those advices and you look, just like the Sharia itself, because so when the ulama look at these things that the Prophet ﷺ said, they develop rulings, right? Halal, haram, fard, this and that. Even in the Sharia, now in order to know how to apply the Sharia, you have to know yourself, right or wrong. Because zakah, is it obligatory for everybody? Is it? No. If I don't have the money to pay zakah, do I pay zakah? Do you understand my point? So one thing is the Sharia is there. It is, in other words, looking at the Hadith of Rasulullah and figuring out what we have to do. What is general and what is not. Then after that, even a person must understand, right, what category do I fall under? Is this commandment for me or is it for somebody else? Tazkiyah works the same way. The reason why I'm mentioning all these things is the first thing that Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala mentions. He basically breaks this down almost like a manual, that there are certain bad qualities that are displeasing to Allah that one must work to get rid of. And there are certain good qualities which are pleasing to Allah that one must acquire. So he starts off with the bad qualities. And the first thing he says, the first thing he mentions is what? Sharihut ta'am, what we call in English gluttony. Greed, insatiable like desire to eat. Right? Eating food all the time. Not for the sake of necessarily becoming healthy or gaining strength, in which there is nothing wrong, but eating food just for the sake of eating food. It's called gluttony. Right? Even in the Christian tradition, this is considered what? A major sin, what they call one of the deadly sins, gluttony. Medically speaking, we obviously know that obesity and the like is all the result of what? Gluttony. Right? All of our health problems, even physically, are all a result of this. Sharihut ta'am, that we love to eat and we love to overeat. And that's why here often quoted is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that مَا مَلَ ابْنَ آدَمْ وِعَنْ شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ, that the children of Adam, human beings, have never filled a container worse than their stomach. Worse than their stomach. You understand? Physically, it's not good for you. Right? And spiritually also, it's not good for you to overeat. This is considered a bad quality for the soul. Now mind you, I'm going to say this ahead of time. We're going to talk about many things. There are two things. There are those evil qualities a human being acquires because of allowing what the ulama call al-quwwatul bahimiyya to overcome them, which means the animalistic traits of a human, those qualities that have to do only with your mundane and physical affairs, eating, sleeping, procreating, which have to do with your physical being. You understand? There are certain bad qualities you have because, simply put, you have allowed the physical to overcome the spiritual. You understand? You have allowed your physical needs and desires to cloud your intellect and to cloud your soul. So therefore, you will always give precedence to your physical desires over what you know is right and wrong. You got it? Those things are a little bit easier to deal with. But there are other spiritual diseases which are much deadlier in many ways, which they say come from al-quwwatul shaytaniyya. These are evil traits within certain people that are not because you're letting the physical overcome the spiritual. They are in itself spiritual khabatha. Yani there is a spiritual darkness within that human being, like kibr, pride, hasad, jealousy, that has nothing to do with the physical, that has everything to do with some type of evil that lies within that person. And those spiritual diseases are much worse because they're much harder to overcome. Right? To overcome the physical, all you have to have is a little bit of a half of a brain. Forgive me for saying that, but literally, right? All the great thinkers in the world, when they start doing their philosophy, they all come to the conclusion that man, when he's only physical, becomes an animal, and nobody has value for an animal. Even in this society, if a person joins the NBA without a college degree, what would they think of them? Think about it, right? Will they make fun of him? Yes. It's like, well, yeah, he plays really good, but he's a complete nincompoop, right? So it means he's nothing more than what? An animal. So even here in kufr, people know that if you're only value is in the physical, you're not a human being. You understand? If the only value you have is in the physical, you can't be a human. Humans are not measured just by their physical traits. If that's the case, we are physically smaller, as Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala said, than most of the animals out there. Is that right or wrong? We are physically incapable of doing half of what the animal kingdom can do. If you think you can eat, right, go out and look at all the animals in the wild and see how much you eat compared to them. You can't eat. You don't know how to eat. They know how to eat. Right? They'll eat much more than you any day. They require even more than you. If you think you can procreate, even birds procreate more than you. Birds. Honest, this is the truth. You think that you're a ladies' man, the birds have, right, more luck than you do. Anything that's physical only, compare yourself to the animal kingdom and what happens. Human beings fall short. So even a kafir can understand that the physical, right, the physical has to be contained and controlled at some point in time. You can't just allow it to control you. So those qualities we can talk about, they're very brief. The more important qualities, however, probably have to do with internal issues that have to do with the very darkness of the soul itself. Like I mentioned, jealousy and kibr. Because those things, they're not physical. Unfortunately, it comes from a very serious imbalance in a human being. And sometimes that imbalance is so serious that there's no hope. Because after all, Iblis, what was his problem? Did he eat too much? What was Iblis's problem? That he ate too much? Or his Aba wastakbar, his kibr. Because in his very soul and mind he thought that what? I am better and a khayrun min. So that is a disease that kicked him out from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah forever. And ajib, even though he knows Allah, subhanallah, he probably has more wahdaniyah, knowing the oneness of Allah, than we do. Because he said in this life, Inni akhaf Allah. In the battle of Badr, this is in the Quran, I fear Allah. On the day of Qiyamah, he will say, Inni akhaf Allah Rabbal Alameen. I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of everything that exists. So Iblis knows who Allah is. You understand my point? But that disease was so serious that even though his wahdaniyah is there, his tawheed is there, it didn't help him, did it? Did it? No, it kicked him out from the mercy of Allah forever. Forever. La'natullah. That's it. He's done. So it's a very serious thing. So just to go over this quality very quickly, we already mentioned this hadith. Actually, ajib that Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that this hadith I mentioned that the man has not filled any vessel worse than his stomach. He said the context of this hadith is actually in the battle of Khaybar. The Banu Qurayza, if you remember, right, when they came there and they had a lot of, mashallah, land, agriculture, right? They grew all of these different types of whatever, like, date palm trees and fruits and the like. And the Sahaba, when they got inside the walls of the city, because they were fighting and they were hungry, some of them ate. This is what Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala said. Some of them began to eat immediately all these different fruits and things that they saw, because it's ghanimah, right? So then some of them got sick. So in this context, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this hadith. Which is ajib, because even physically we know that overeating does what? It hurts you. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, بِحَسْبِ ibn Adam naqimat or akalat yuqimna صُلْبَهُ, that all that man has to eat is enough to keep his back straight. In other words, here we see that even you can take this as a qa'idah, not in fiqh, of course. But Rasulullah ﷺ basically telling us a golden rule. What is he telling us? It's enough for you to eat that which keeps your back straight. In other words, what's the point of eating? The point of eating is to keep you physically strong. That's it. That's the only purpose of eating food. What's the point of eating food? Right? يُقِمْنَ صَلْبَهُ is to keep your back straight. Is to keep you physically strong. So all you need to keep you physically strong, if you were to even ask anyone medically, how much do you really need to eat of protein or whatever else it is, right? People who work out and want to keep themselves, right? You don't have to eat that much. Depending on your metabolism too. We'll get into that. That's why don't try this at home. But the normal human being, right, doesn't have to eat that much to keep themselves physically strong. But then the Prophet says, if the person cannot restrain themselves and they have to eat more, فَثُلُثُهُ لِتَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثُهُ لِشِرَابِهِ وَثُلُثُهُ لِنَفَسِهِ. That 1/3 for his food, 1/3 for his drink, and 1/3 to be able to breathe, like room to breathe, to be able to take a breath. Nafasi, I need to take a breath. You understand? Because if you overeat, what happens? People say, I have to rest. Why do you have to rest? Because I can't move. I can't breathe. Let me sit on the couch like this before Tarawih and then come and burp the entire time. I said, why? Because I ate my fill. Huh? So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you have to eat more than what keeps you healthy, in other words, if you can't do that, if you can't put yourself on a strict diet, you know my people, the Gorawala, that's what they do, right? You see these guys, 60 years old, running in the morning time, in Fajr time, you see them running by and all this, right? Literally, they count the proteins. They'll do that. Why do you think they have all these things marked on their food? Okay, this is 8 grams of protein and right, 5 grams of whatever, this, that, and the other thing, and then I'm going to make sure that I eat this and eat that. Like if you tried to do that to some of our people, they'd have a heart attack. Do you want me to regulate my life like that? Can't I just eat what I want? It's like, no, you have to start watching your diet. And say, oh my God, forget it. Right? Even some of the regular Americans too, they're in such health problems because of what? The same thing, right? One of my friends, his father, the doctor was telling him basically your diet is horrible, you have to change. You have to stop drinking Diet Coke. It was one of the things he used to drink all the time. You need to drink more water. He didn't want to listen. He told the doctor, give me the Coke. He said, what's in it? He said, look, there's water in it, forget it. Right? There's water in it. I have my water right here. I'm going to do whatever I want, right? So we know that doesn't work. But if you can't do that, you don't have the discipline. I can't restrict myself like that. I won't be able to tell my nafs no, that you have to eat a certain amount and only certain foods and only at certain times. Then if you cannot do that, which is the majority of us, this is why I said before you delve into the science, you have to know who you are first. If you know you don't have that discipline, then the Prophet ﷺ said at least this much discipline, which is what? 1/3 for your food, 1/3 for your drink, and then 1/3 for room to breathe. In other words, right before you feel that one last corner of your stomach being full, you tell yourself, no. Khalas, I'm done. This is enough. Yakfi, I'm done. You understand? That is the discipline that we should have at the very least. At the very least. Because of why? What does overeating actually do to a person? Simply put, this is the long discussion here he has in many pages. Simply put, to make it very easy for us to understand, overeating develops a greed in us, right, of satiating something that will never be satiated. Meaning food here has a purpose. And what is that purpose? Again, yuqimna sulbahu, it is to keep your back straight. So as long as you're physically healthy, that's the point of food, right? Now, if you just eat for the sake of eating, what you're trying to do in reality is replicate Jannah here, which is not going to happen. Because we all know what your food becomes too, right? That won't happen in Jannah, alhamdulillah. Right? So you can't do that. When you try to replicate Jannah here, what happens? You overeat, you end up becoming sick. Not only that, but if you eat a lot, now he takes it a little further, and this is where I will end, that there are certain advices that you cannot take for us in this time and age. What he's actually getting to is much more deeper than just that, keeping yourself physically healthy, right? And not overeating just because you're indulging in something out of your greed. Of course, Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, right, is talking about something much deeper, which is what? That the more you eat, period, and he's now taking the example of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, who basically, you know, the Sahaba, of course, are one thing, but the Prophet ﷺ, as Aisha radhiyallahu anha said, ما شبع على محمد بشعير يومين متتابعين حتى قبض, right? That the Prophet ﷺ min khubzin sha'irin, that the Prophet's family never satiated themselves, never ate to their full. In other words, ما شبع, they never ate to their full with even that much of what? Of just barley bread or wheat or any, like, you know, like, what do you call it? Yeah, like a barley bread or something of that nature. You know barley bread, have you ever seen it? Anyone here has never seen barley bread? It's very coarse. It's very coarse. It's not fine, especially not like the bread we buy here in America. It's very hard and it's very coarse. So in other words, Aisha radhiyallahu anha is saying that the entire family, meaning us, Ummahatul Mu'mineen radhiyallahu anha, the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we did not satiate ourselves, fill ourselves with even barley bread for 2 days consecutively. In other words, 2 days, 3 days sometimes, other narrations, all day, like sometimes even more than that. Days would go by where there was nothing to cook in the Prophet's house, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would not eat. And this happened until the Prophet was taken from this world. Hatta qubida. Until the Prophet was taken from this world, this is how they lived. In other words, the Prophet was not eating. Now, why can't you try that at home? Simply put, long story short, in the Hadith of Sahih Bukhari, when the Prophet ﷺ used to do what's called tawassul, meaning he used to fast and not break his fast. He didn't eat anything. The Sahaba saw this. They thought, hey, that's a nifty idea. Maybe we can try it. So the Prophet ﷺ forbade them. And he said something to them, which is for us too. Lestu kahayatikum. I'm not like you. I get my energy and strength from where you don't. So in other words, if I don't eat, it's not going to affect me. I'm still kind of the strength of 40 men without food. You guys, if you did that, eventually you're just going to die of starvation, right? So you don't do this. You get the point. This is why it's important to distinguish what things Rasulullah did that don't apply to us and what things Rasulullah said that do apply to us. So what did the Prophet say? I just told you. Simple, right? 3 things. What are they? 1/3 food, 1/3 water and drink, and 1/3 to breathe. So you're not going to try and do this, hopefully. If you did try to do this, that bring barley bread to the house and that's the only thing we can eat for 2 days straight, I'm sure your wives will be complaining to Mufti Sahib very soon. You know, my husband has lost his mind completely. We have nothing in the house except for barley bread. And by the way, it'd only be so long before people, right, would actually like go, your children too would say, oh my God, right? What is daddy doing? It's just disaster. Don't do this, right? So what do? Follow the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. But Imam Ghazali is actually trying to get us to think about something. Why didn't the Prophet eat? That's one thing. Of course, lestu kahayatikum. He had strength and he got that strength from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we cannot get. Let's just leave that alone, okay? But the Sahaba too, as a practice, generally did not overeat. Even Umar anhu, there's a narration in the Muwatta of Imam Malik where he once had to take a ghusl before Fajr. You're grown men, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, right? And he blamed it on what? He said, this is because now we're eating more meat than we used to. You understand? We're eating more meat than we used to. So now my body, this is the point Imam Ghazali is making. Simply put, medically, if I eat a lot of protein, what happens? Does the body become stronger? Does the shahwa of the body become stronger? Physically, what's the answer? Yes. So Imam Ghazali is trying to say that, look, your shahwa, if you eat a lot, will be out of control. You understand? If you eat a lot, the more physically you will have shahwa, and you will have to fulfill that shahwa. You will have to fulfill that shahwa. That's why Umar said, this is because of the meat we're eating. We didn't eat this much meat before, we didn't have these problems. Now we're eating meat all the time because, mashallah, we have it. Now we're having these issues. Right? It's as simple. Now the problem is that, again, why we can't follow that advice so much? 2 things. One is because of ourselves and our situation. Well, actually, that's the main issue. I shouldn't say 2, but that's the main issue. What do I mean by that? Let's face it. Sorry to go off a little bit on a different of a tangent, but we live in an environment here in, again, America, right? That there are certain things that we are encountering every day. And whether you like it or not, it affects your psyche and you as a person. Let me just give you a little bit of idea. Allow me to be philosophical for a second. I don't know who in this room has ever heard of the name John Locke. Have you ever heard his name? He was a philosopher in England during the 18th century, and his ideas influenced the so-called founding fathers of this country. Why am I mentioning that? Because he believed, he denied metaphysical realities. He denied that the soul, for instance, can come up to any type of, and learn anything of what is real, that these are just fantasies. And what is real is only what you experience. Do you understand what that means, right? Like all these things, what other philosophers even, they used to believe that there's a soul, that there's a higher purpose in life than the physical, like we mentioned before. Here, this man is saying that the only thing that has value is what? Is what you experience. That's the only thing that's real. If I can't experience it, meaning see, feel, touch, and have all of it, then it's not real. Why is that important? Because he came up with an ideology that human satisfaction and reality is only in experiencing as much as they can without being told what to do by the church or by the king. You understand? In other words, what we have now. So what does that mean? People should be able to experience whatever they want without anyone telling them what to do. Isn't that not what we live in? Don't deny it. Is that not what we live in or not? Right? People should be able to experience whatever they want, and no one has the right to tell them no. So if I want to go to the store and I want to buy whatever and eat it, that's my right. Is that right or wrong? Is that what we live in or not? That's my right. I can go to the store and buy whatever I want and eat it because I should be allowed to have the experience, and no one can tell me no. No one has the right to tell me no. Now, when you live in an environment like that, whether you and I like it or not, it's all subconsciously affecting us. All of us. So if you try and go do this at home, in other words, right, take you and your kids and your family, or even if you're single, and I'm only going to eat barley bread, right? And today at iftar, when everyone brings out the pakora and everything else, I'm only going to take one date and a little bit of water and say, brother, we have to put these things into practice. We need to eat less. That's not going to work. In only a matter of a few weeks or even less than, maybe a year tops. There's a reason why I said a year. There's another narration, you probably heard Abdullah ibn Amr anhu, right? He was in such a state that when he got married, he didn't even look at his wife when she came to his house. And the Prophet ﷺ came and talked to him and told him all these things that we know. Your body has a right. Your body has a right. Your neighbors have a right. Your wife has a right. Calm down, right? This narration, Abdullah ibn Umar anhuma actually commented on this, and it said it is normal for some people when they're striving to this spiritual striving, so to speak, that they may come in this situation where you might not have any value for food. You might not have any value for anything in this dunya. But this state should not last longer than a year. This is what Abdullah ibn Umar anhuma said. That if this state lasts longer than a year, he literally called it a bid'ah. Meaning you're supposed to come back down on earth and live in the world. Okay? So what I'm telling you is that even if it lasts for a year, usually you won't last that long. Eventually what will happen is, because psychologically you live in this environment, and what the shaitan and your own nafs is going to tell you is that I'm supposed to be able to do whatever I want. Right? Experience whatever I want. And here I am depriving myself while everybody else is doing what? Whatever they want. What am I doing? Why am I the only fool doing this? This is what you're going to think. You don't have to say it. It's what's going to happen. So eventually your nafs is going to fight back, and it's going to overcome you. So the name in this game is not to go to these extremes. The name in this game is to figure out from the advice of the Prophet ﷺ how me as a person in this environment can strike a balance. Okay? Where I'm not at one extreme, that I make my whole life biryani, right? And eating as much as I can, as tasty as I can, that the food, their whole life becomes food. Okay? But rather, how I can do something more along the medium, in the middle, right? خَيْرُ أُمُورِ أَوْسَطُهَا, right? In the middle. And not also the other extreme, which is thinking that you, in this environment, when basically you're told day in and day out that you can experience whatever you want, and you have the right to, and you should. You understand? You have the right to, and you should do whatever you want. That in that extreme too, you're going to say that, no, I'm going to do the exact opposite. That now I'm going to have no experience whatsoever, right? No good in this world whatsoever. Just really coarse bread, coarse clothes, coarse everything. That is only going to last so long before it bites you back. And then you're going to go do things that you didn't do before even. Sometimes that also drives people to do things that are haram. We've seen this with our own eyes. Okay? So you have to strike a middle ground. Simply put, the middle ground is this. What did the hadith say? You can go over this. Third of food, third of drink, and a third to breathe. And each and every person in this room, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be different. Some people's metabolism is a little bit more than others. Some people are physically just bigger. So if you weigh 130 pounds and you eat one date in water, and then you tell a brother who's 250 pounds, right? Akhi, what are you doing? You understand? It doesn't work. What they need compared to what you need, right? Is like the difference between night and day. So just relax. That's why even overeating in Sharia, just speaking about Islamic law, overeating is actually allowed in certain states. Imam al-Sarakhsi rahimahullah ta'ala writes that there are certain cases that overeating is permitted. And you know what's interesting? One of the things he mentioned is that if people eat a lot in the nights of Ramadan to strengthen themselves for their long fast or for Taraweeh, he said it's permissible. That's why, again, don't take these things and start judging the ummah after this. Like, oh, look at what the ummah does. People write blog spots, the ummah eats so much after iftar. Don't worry about it. Let the ummah be. Jaiz, yajuz, okay? It's okay. As long as they're not throwing away a lot of food and being extravagant. If they want to eat a little bit at iftar, let them eat. Hada yajuz. It's okay. It's permissible. There's other cases too. For instance, if you have guests and you already ate and they want to eat, what do? You should eat more to make them feel comfortable, because obviously if you're not eating anything and they're just like stuffing 2 plates and then you're there with like 1 piece of chicken, they're going to say, oh man, see, the sheikh is so pious and I know I'm going to hell, astaghfirullah, I'm eating 2-3 plates and this guy, mashallah, he's eating 1 piece of chicken. What do you do in a situation like that? Make the people feel good, so eat a little bit more, no problem. You understand? So what am I saying is Sharia even allows a person to overeat in certain conditions, in certain states. So really, what is the lesson then? That eating has a purpose. يُقِمْنَ الصَّبَّهُ, as the hadith states, that it is to keep you physically strong. As long as you fulfill that purpose, then you should regulate yourself. And then the Prophet ﷺ actually made it very simple for us. How do you regulate yourself? Again, what is it? 1/3 food, 1/3 of your drink, and 1/3 to leave room to breathe. If you can do this much, then you will be, literally this will be your tazkiyat an-nafs. This will be reformation of the soul and the spirit. Right? That's why some shuyukh say, taking into consideration, like I mentioned before, that's why I mentioned all these John Locke and all this American civilization. It was because, look, you live in this environment. You are in America, right? That's what I said, right? Whether you like it or not, this place, it does affect the way you think. Your kids are born here. If they go back to Pakistan or India or any part of will they know that they're Americans? Oh yeah. They'll sniff them as soon as they get off the airport. Amriki bache, no doubt, right? They know it. They see it in the way you act, the way you talk, the way you do things. Whether you like it or not, this is what it is. So when you're in this environment and you have this mentality, you want to experience things. That's why shuyukh say, very simply put, Kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu. Eat and drink and don't be extravagant. In other words, as long as it's halal, just don't sin. That's basically what the shuyukh are telling us nowadays. As long as it's halal, just don't sin. That will be literally your tazkiyah. That will be your reformation here of your soul. And if you want to do more than that, then you should always seek the advice and the guidance of someone more experienced than you. Because it could be that if you try to go above and beyond that, you may break yourself. Especially, like I said, in this environment, you may break yourself and end up being worse than you were before. And that's not the goal. The goal is to become pleasing to Allah, right? Right or wrong? The goal is not to become a Junaid Baghdadi rahimahullah ta'ala. You're not going to become him. It's just not going to happen. Maybe illa masha'Allah, maybe a few of you, Allah ta'ala will get blessed to be like that. But for most of us, that's not going to happen. So all we want to do is learn, inshallah, right, what qualities then are going to drive us towards Allah's pleasure and drive us away from Allah's pleasure. Now, having said that, we will skip all the physical things, meaning those qualities we have to do, quwwatu bahimiyya, the physical, overcoming the spiritual, skip all that. And we'll go directly to what? The spiritual diseases of the heart that have to do with hasad, kibr, ujub, all these things, jealousy, pride, conceit, all of these qualities which have to do more with the darkness of a person's soul. Hopefully nobody in this crowd has those qualities. But even if those qualities exist, we must know first of all what they are and how to uproot them, right or wrong. What they are and how to do what? How to get rid of them. So inshallah next time we'll start on that subject inshallah for the next session. Jazakumullahu khairah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq and give us all hidayah and make it easy for us and give us afiyah in this world wa akhirah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullahu khairan kathira.